Welcome to Dekom, Law and Disorder.
The views expressed on this podcast are Peter Dekom's opinions based on his legal experience, research, and academic work. The podcast does not offer legal advice. For any legal matters, always consult an independent attorney who can assess your specific situation. And now, on with the show.
Hi, everybody. It's Peter Dekom again. I was going to call this segment Healthcare Simple, and then I started looking around at how we're handling it in this country, and I decided to rename the segment Health Scare. We have some of the most incredible physicians in the world, some of the most incredible technology, some of the most incredible research, and we may have one of the worst medical systems in the world. We have a life expectancy that is continuing to fall. It's a general metric of the well-being of the society as a whole. And it's also very hard to separate healthcare from so many issues. For example, as we have climate change giving incredible additional heat, people die just from the heat. They may die from the wildfires that are caused by the heat. If you happen to be a fun drug user, you may find that, for example, high heat will kill you into an overdose much more quickly than if you were just token away without any concerns. So there are lots of little things that are linked. It's also interesting that climate change leads to migration of insects that carry disease. So that impacts your health. And it's kind of interesting, where do I top line this? How do I understand the American healthcare system? And I think given the current complexion of healthcare, senior executives, cabinet level folks, et cetera, policymakers, I have to start with a simple premise. And that is to understand how the Trump administration makes policy decisions on a macro level. I've sort of discerned that Donald Trump divides the world into winners and losers. And losers are anybody who doesn't fall into the winner category, and winners are only people who are making a lot of money and or their supporters and financiers. If you're not one of those, you're a loser. Here's the problem. A large segment of the old world Republican Party, this kind of goes back to noblesse oblige from ancient times, do not believe that people who are not making money or doing really incredible stuff in the military deserve anything, that they are expendable. It's a terrible thought, but I'm going to give you some quotes in a minute that will kind of bear that out. B-E-A-R. It's interesting when people start speaking their mind. And I think when they speak their mind and they say something that sounds horrific, and then they just look at you, why don't you get that? Why don't you understand what I just said? Why don't you agree with me? I mean, after all, why do we need to give all this money to people who aren't actually building the society? That's silly. Why are we doing that? Boy, is that a nasty way to look at the world. And you look at people who start believing the mythology that is built up in the medical community. For example, in South Carolina, getting a vaccination is not particularly a good idea if you want to fit in with the rest of society. As a result, there is now a major measles outbreak in upstate South Carolina, where just about every kid in the classroom who is there is getting measles. And measles gets more damaging as you get older, but your kids come home and they love you, so they share it with you. But measles are growing and vaccinations are not. So you're having a situation here where if you have really high character human beings, Republican or Democrat, they'll make some amazing decisions. There was a time in the summer of 2017 when we were about to repeal what people call Obamacare, but it's the, ACA, Affordable Care Act. And it came down to one vote, one single solitary vote. And the senator who cast that deciding vote was dying of cancer. A former presidential candidate and a Republican. But here's a guy who always seemed to rise above the politics to do the right thing. His name is John McCain. He was an amazing man. And he came out of the office hospital bed to cast this deciding vote late at night, where basically Obamacare, Affordable Care Act was about to die an ugly, writhing death. And he was the last vote, and he was going to cast a deciding vote. If he didn't cast a vote, it would go to the vice president, which is a Republican, and then it would be all over. So they're grinning ear to ear. And up comes John McCain to cast his vote at the front of the Senate. And he gives a thumbs down and votes no. What a bold move that was. He died shortly thereafter. But he basically did the right thing. And I don't think being a Republican or a Democrat necessitates your being mean or bad or whatever. I think the character of the man or the woman who's in the elective office should determine who they are. I mean, you look at Marjorie Taylor Greene that the Democrats have almost uniformly roasted, but you suddenly see that she's fighting to reveal the Epstein documents against the president she has worshipped in obsequious ways. And she also seems to care about her constituents, and they're losing their medical coverage or getting it to be so expensive they can't have it. Marjorie Taylor Greene, where did you get that courage? And all of a sudden you look at her and say, look, anybody can rise up. Anybody can get to where we need to go. We've got some interesting things here that are going on in the country that are affecting us, even though you probably don't know it. There is a major growing attrition of practicing physicians. And it's basically, as a population grows, the number of doctors is shrinking. You have, in the last, between 2013 and 2019, and it continues to this day, attrition rates have moved from 3.5% of the physician base to 4.9%. And that's at the same time that you are having a greater population. Female physicians are having a higher attrition rate. Psychiatrists are dropping like a stone. And you're looking at this at a point in time where we've never needed doctors more than we need them today. But we have affordability issues. You go to medical school. My daughter-in-law went to medical school, graduated very near the top of her class of a major medical school. And I'll tell you that what they have is a major six-figure accumulation of medical costs that they're going to be paying off until the rest of their lives, or unless someone honors their absolute, forgiveness of student loans that they were promised if they work for nonprofits. I guess if you work for any of Trump's companies, that could qualify as a nonprofit. Oh, well, never mind. But as we're looking here, we have this massive shutdown, and Trump is firing people. He's apparently substituted himself for Congress because he has what we call a pocket rescission, which doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the Constitution. If Congress has allocated money, and the President of the United States at the time has signed that into law, the next president can't say, you know what? I don't want to spend it. I don't want to spend it on democratic institutions. You can't do that, but he does. And you have a very complacent, deer in the headlights Democratic Party and a massive constituency. But now I'm going to read you a couple of direct quotes from people who, it kind of really bothers me. The first one is from someone named Lindsey Graham, oddly enough, senator from South Carolina. And he basically, the issue during this shutdown is whether or not the Democrats can extract a concession. Like, let's extend the subsidies for the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, so all the millions and millions of people who have that insurance and have it subsidized because they don't make enough money in a world where affordability of insurance is through the roof. Well, you know what? What does he say? Well, let's see what his word is. Let's have a rational discussion, but not with the government shutdown. It's up to you. If you want to keep it shut down, it's not going to change how I approach health care. And then he states that why do we even want, I'll read this to it, the subsidies we're talking about here If the Affordable Care Act is so affordable, why every time I turn around, we're spending $350 billion to keep it afloat? How about I give you an answer to that, Mr. Graham? Government is not a profit-making institution. It serves the people. Is the military making a profit? Are we seeing millions and millions of dollars because we're raping, pillaging, and looting? No! Government agencies aren't profit makers. They cost money. And that's a very important thing in our world. We also have a guy, and I can't find his quote, but if I do find it, who basically says, look, oh, here it is. Nebraska Republican Representative Mike Flood basically said, the rural areas will just have to deal with hospitals closing. Huh? People who have to drive 80 miles an hour, 80 miles away or 100 miles away, and they're bleeding to death. They used to have a hospital, but because we're cutting all these medical programs, Medicaid, and we're cutting ACA, all this stuff, they now have to drive another half hour or an hour just to get to a place to get treated. So they're going to die. So what? They're not the winners. And I find that absolutely reprehensible, that a human life is absolutely expendable in order to give tax cuts so a rich person can buy a fifth home. I don't get it. I'm not into that at all. Also, one of the things that we see is people will look at these medical situations, medical programs, and they'll use the following words. It's an entitlement, or it's creeping socialism. And whenever I hear that, either the person is stupid as a nail because they don't know what the word means, or they're being mean-spirited, greedy, and manipulative. And usually it's the latter, although we've been so used to the manipulation of the words, people just banding them about. Education is not socialism. Public education is not socialism. We had public education going way back to the era that we were pre-America. In Boston, we had the first public school. And public school has been an important feature of American life. It's a social program. And that's the problem. If you use the word social and you want to throw mud at something, you just say social, that must mean socialism. I'm going to read you a definition from Webster's Dictionary. And it's not what you think it is. Socialism is any of various egalitarian economic and political theories or movements advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and the distribution of goods. In other words, government owns all the stuff that makes money. They own all the value. And they allocate it to you in a way that they decide it should be allocated, trying to be fair. Many socialists also today don't believe that socialism is inevitable. But let me give you a situation. Let's say we live in a society, lo and behold, you go to college for 8 years and you can't get a job because those jobs are now being helmed by AI. So nobody who's educated or especially trained, or very few people who are especially trained, can earn a living. The people who make the money are the people who own the computers and own the equipment, and they have everything. So how do you get ahead? Where's upward mobility? Well, upward mobility is already dead. But if you are in that era, you're probably going to rely on some kind of universal basic income, and that's called socialism. And it really is socialism because at that point, the government is actually, the oligarchs are suddenly an extension of the government and they own everything. So you have a different system. I don't like that system. I think we're not enforcing our antitrust laws. We're letting rich people get away with it. Anytime there's a benefit to be given, we cut their taxes. We make the rest of the country pay the interest on the deficit that we now have incurred because we cut their taxes. It's not fair. Communism is a different system. It's a doctrine based on revolutionary Marxism, socialism, and Marxist-Leninism that was the official ideology of the Soviet Union. It's a totalitarian system of government in which a single authoritarian party controls the state-owned means of production. So it's socialism by force. And I don't like that one. And I don't know that socialism per se is ready to come in and be a mainstream part of America. But I also need for everybody to understand that every time someone uses the word creeping socialism or basically Marxism, whatever they're using, radical leftists, those people want to have winners and losers. And the winners are the people who are making a lot of money, and the losers are everybody else. And if you aren't a billionaire or at least a millionaire worth $50 or $100 million, you're a loser. Unless you're in the military and maybe you work your way up to being a general so you can be fired by Pete Hegseth. But when you're going through all these ridiculous analytical sets, let me be really blunt. We've got to stop playing word games. We really have to stop saying things that are just patently ridiculous. So we keep telling everybody that, we don't want socialism. Look at how badly it works. I'm not going to tell you for a second that universal health care works brilliantly all the time. It does not. It has budget jumps, it has delays, things are slow, and it depends on which country you're in. If you're in Switzerland or Germany, oh yeah, es ist sehr gut, yeah. It's a very good thing. It works. And in Germany, for example, the universal health care is administered by the old insurance companies. They're given a 15% fee to run the system, not the profits they used to make. But the problem with our system, there's one clear, absolute, unequivocal priority in the American healthcare system. And unfortunately, it isn't what we need it to be. It's called profits. And if you look at the levels of profits being made by some hospitals, not all of them, but definitely pharmaceutical companies or pharmas, definitely you're looking at profits in certain aggregators who are used by pharmacological companies to get their products into hospitals, into pharmacies, and they add another layer of profitability. If you can't make money in insurance, if you can't make money in a pharmaceutical company, if you can't make money in all these roll-ups, you're seeing companies going around and buying small hospitals and getting rid of all the backup equipment, all the backup medicine that they need in case of an emergency, and firing most of the doctors and basically making money by, cutting the cost into oblivion so that nobody gets actual medical care. And that's one of the problems that we have in our current medical system. So let's start with the premise, number one, that universal health care is not creeping socialism. It isn't communism. It isn't coming from the radical left. And it is intended to benefit everybody. Now, someone said that I have a list here of all the countries on the planet who have universal health care. Here it is, right in front of me, this massive thing. And all I can tell you is it's a lot of pages long. And I could sit here and read the names of the countries and probably take up at least the rest of this presentation. But it's not just all of Europe. All of Europe does have universal health care. All of the developed world has universal health care. But let me just go down a couple of countries in Africa. Algeria, Botswana, Burkina Faso, Mauritius, Rwanda, Seychelles, Tunisia, Asia, Azerbaijan, Bhutan, China, India, Hong Kong, Cyprus, Indonesia. Are we embarrassed here? We're America. We're rich. These little dipshit countries that Mr. Trump has often referred to them are providing health care for their citizens, even when they can't completely afford to give them what we could give our people. They're doing it anyway. Cuba, you get good medical care. It's okay, their x-ray equipment isn't the most modern. They do the best they can with what they've got. We aren't even doing anything that's remotely positive to take care of the people that we have in this country. And that bothers me. I don't need another layers and layers and layers and layers of profits. At some point, I don't mind people making a few bucks. I also look at, PI lawyers suing doctors for malpractice. There's a place for that, but we got a little out of hand. If you're in certain kinds of practices as a doctor, you could be spending $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year in malpractice insurance. And trust me, that goes into the system and they get paid for it. There are other things that happen. One of the things that you hear yelled and screamed by Republicans, well, all the Democrats are doing is making sure there's enough money to take care of all those undocumented aliens. Really? Well, first of all, some states have laws that tell hospitals if someone's bleeding to death and they will come to your emergency room, you have to take care of them, worry about the money later. That does happen. And obviously the cost of taking care of that individual who's not insured and undocumented winds up being a cost that is amortized across all the other charges of that hospital. So in that case, that is an indirect way of our covering undocumented aliens. But the law says the federal funding, whether it's under Medicare or Medicaid or ACA, cannot be used to pay for the medical costs of undocumented aliens. It's not like, oh, well, if we want to, we can. And it's not allowed. If it's indirect, okay, let's deal with the indirect costs. But there's another question. If there's a pandemic and disease and germs are spreading like wildfire, do you really want to turn away the undocumented aliens who are going to live among us and let them spread the disease widely? I'm not saying there's an easy solution to that, but I sure want you to think about it. We obviously have another thing out there, and I would say the big thing missing in Washington, D.C. today, my hometown, is trust. It doesn't exist. Democrats don't trust Republicans, don't trust anybody. And I would have to say, if you trust the Department of Health Services for medical advice, you are an idiot, because they have managed to assemble the least competent medical personnel in the history of senior medicine. I'm not saying that the medicine in 1886 was really modern, but at least in those days, they did the best they could with what they've got. We're basically making sure that the doctors that are at HHS, Health and Human Services, are the worst doctors you could pick. They believe in things that are disproven in the rest of the world. For example, when you look at vaccinations or you look at whatever, I'm sorry, Donald, Tylenol does not cause autism. And I'm sorry, if you circumcise your parts, men, you're not going to father autistic kids. Those are complete, utter, ridiculous falsehoods. Now, Peter, where do you get the temerity to basically contradict the worm brain man? Well, the answer is very simple. Europe has been conducting these analyses and these studies for decades. Sweden has like decades and decades of statistics on this stuff. They know about the Tylenol stuff. They've been looking at trying to investigate autism, et cetera. I think the other problem with looking at autism as being caused, autism isn't a one thing. You can be mildly autistic and be brilliant. It's called Asperger's syndrome. You can be profoundly autistic and have difficulty struggling in life, or you can be autistic and be a super genius in an area, perhaps being the best pianist on planet Earth. We really need to start saying autism is like cancer. There are different kinds of cancer and there are different kinds of autism. So when we create this stuff, the other thing that we've done in the world of autism, our metrics are more sensitive. We're able to detect things like autism in the population when it's in very small amounts. And that results in greater reported autistic cases. But it doesn't mean there's more autism. It just means we're including more stuff in the definition, and we're creating technologies that can find those things. So I look at all that stuff and I'm petrified, because I'm one of these guys, as you can tell by the fact that I'm actually doing this podcast, I'm a fact freak. And when people say the sky is striped and yellow and pink, and I look up and it looks blue or it's night or whatever it is, I can't agree with that. I'm not going to go with the flow. If something's not clear to me, if I can't understand it, I'm just going to say, no, that's not true. And the problem we also have is the world has gotten so complex. People are outsourcing their opinions to leaders they think they should be able to believe in when those leaders are wrong. I mean, I listened to the speech at the UN from Trump, and he talked about how China made all these wind turbines, but they never used them. China is the greatest user of wind turbines on planet Earth. China accounts for 74% of all the alternative energy investments on planet Earth. So I look at all the stuff we got in technology. Why can't we take this technology and deploy it in our medical world? If we have delays in certain other systems because people have to wait too long, how about giving that problem to AI? Say, okay, AI, can you prioritize people based on their symptoms? And can you create scheduling that is more efficient and also filter out so people don't have to go to 5 doctors to find out where they need to be, where they can go to one doctor, get their test and all the analyses that they need, and the AI will direct them to the end game instead of having to go to multiple layers of doctors they don't have to go to. There are a lot of things we can do to make the entire process a lot easier. So let's talk a little bit about how we're trying to deal with costs. Affordability is like the big issue right now. It's affordability of houses, affordability of education, affordability, all kinds of stuff. And so we have some agreements between Donald Trump and some major pharmas on their proprietary stuff. And it helps. I can't say it doesn't. But it's like a drop in the bucket. Generics, people find ways. Patents last for 20 years. People want to figure out, how do I extend the patent? Okay, I will put a different coating on it. It'll be sugar with a certain flavor in it, and I'll patent that. And they'll get a patent. It doesn't belong in the patent. It shouldn't be patented, but people extend patents by creating different uses for it and all that other stuff. So I'm looking at these things and thinking, look, the one thing that's missing in all this is common sense. And I don't think there's anybody in senior management in the current administration with any. They're basically all about, okay, what's in it for me? How do I build my power? How do I do what I have to do? All right, let's talk about affordability. I hate to say this, I mean, I'm going to do it anyway. It shows my age. How much was room, board, and tuition at Yale University 55 years ago? 10,000, 20,000, how much? Room, board, and tuition. I hate to say this. I'm really old. $3,300 a year. People have difficulty understanding that. Maybe if you applied contemporary pricing structures, even then it would have been about $15,000. What was the money paid for people going to state universities? $0. What do we pay for professional schools? When I went to law school, I got the highest scholarship that my university gave, UCLA. I got $500 a year. That was a lot of money because my tuition was $1,500 a year. What is it now? I've got my producer sitting over making faces at me, and she went to law school. Professional school's ridiculous. You get someone going to medical school, 4 years, the average cost there is in 6 figures a year. Okay? $100,000 or more dollars a year to go to medical school and law school, et cetera. It's just a lot of money, maybe less than a couple of other schools. But for the most part, medical school is ridiculous. And trust me, when you're in medical school, you ain't working part-time unless you want to be a cadaver, and does not pay well and is not particularly a comfortable place to be. But bottom line, you can't do anything other than medical school. You barely get enough sleep. And now you graduate, you get that lovely hood. And I mean, a number of my family members are medical doctors, and I went to their graduations, and it's amazing to go to those graduations. But then they turn around and say, oh, now what do I do? And they look at their bill and say, oh God, I owe $350,000, I owe $200,000, whatever it is, it's always in major 6 figures. Now they could have gone to the military service, and they could have got their medical education paid for under certain circumstances. But then they're going to go directly into the military for 5 years. Yes, they come in as a captain, and yes, the military does take good care of them, but they may not get the specialty that they wanted to get into. So now they graduate, and they're going to go into the regular stuff. I'm going to go be a resident or an intern, whatever you want to call it. That takes 2 or 3 years. You basically go to a hospital. They rotate you around the various departments. And you get to see what it's like to be a doctor. And as each year progresses, you become increasingly skilled with hands-on skills from that residency. And let's say you want to specialize. Okay, what does residency pay? And you got $250,000 to $400,000 worth of loans outstanding. Residency typically pays between $50,000 and $60,000 a year. Now that's probably 100% of your payback from medical school. So you have to figure out a way to juggle stuff so you can defer it a little bit. That's a lot of money to owe when you aren't making much at all. We're doing this. We're having attrition and reductions of people becoming doctors because it's too damn expensive. You want to be a doctor in Mexico? You don't have to get an MD. You can actually get a medical doctor's degree as an undergraduate. As you look at medical school, most people have an undergraduate major, which is not medicine. It may be chemistry, it may be biology, it may be English literature with a lot of science courses, whatever it is, it ain't medical school. Medical school is what happened later. Maybe you went to nursing school, that's okay. That's an undergraduate major. And now you're doing your residency, but you want to do something a little more specialized. I want to be a cardiologist. Well, lawyers can't do that. We ain't got hearts. But maybe you want to be an orthopedic surgeon. Welcome to another 2 to 5 years of additional internships in what we call a fellowship. And by the way, the money soars up to maybe $71,000 a year. You still aren't making money. You're still being demanded by those greedy little bastards who lent you the money to pay back your loan. And so you're now sitting there, you don't buy a house, you can't afford to get married, you're living in a shitty rental, and the rental prices are skyrocketing. And you know someday you're going to make a lot of money, and you're angry. So when you can make a lot of money, you tend to go for it. Now, these lovely people have now spent 4 years as an undergraduate, 4 years in medical school, 2 to 3 years in residency, 3 to 5 years in an advanced fellowship, and now they're ready to practice. They're old men and women at this time. They're in their mid to late 30s, some of them. And that's, in the world of getting a career started, it's a career that starts late in this world. And there you go, affordability. You couldn't afford the damn degree. You can't afford to live as a resident or a fellow. You can't afford to take, if you want to go and work in impoverished communities, they don't pay you enough to pay off your loans. I cannot tell you how many people I know in law school and medical school who totally aspired to work in family law in small communities or in law that helps poor people, et cetera. And they look at their obligations and they wind up going to very commercial law firms because they have no goddamn choice. And that's not right. Medical school should be free. All of it. And all the internships and fellowships, et cetera, should have real pay going with it. And yes, we can extract a couple of years of voluntary, involuntary, voluntary, whatever service from these people at some point in their lives. You owe 2 or 3 years to the government, but we'll pay you during those 2 or 3 years. And we encourage people to do that. One phenomenon that I have noticed at Kaiser Permanente, which is one of the most, it's a huge hospital operation. Everything's under one roof, unless you go to a very esoteric specialist, you get out of that. It's at everything. There's a minor charge for seeing a doctor or buying pharmaceuticals. All that stuff is there. But used to believe that the doctors who went to Kaiser were like, they couldn't get a job somewhere else because Kaiser doesn't pay as well as a lucrative private practice. You also don't have a lot of cosmetic surgeons working at Kaiser. I don't think there are any, unless it's for the burn ward. But ultimately, what goes on here is people are saying, wait a minute, the pandemic changed everything. There were doctors during the COVID pandemic who had no patients coming to their private practices because people didn't want to go into an office where they could be infected by other people going to the office. So nobody went at all. That's where telemedicine really exploded. And these people are doctors who have all these student loans due. And unless they negotiated a special exemption with their lenders on their student loans, government providers were basically doing that. But some of the private providers weren't. So they're sitting there saying, do I ever want to be in another situation like this? So all of a sudden, the applicants at Kaiser started being people who were in the top 10% of their graduating medical school class, who did residencies at top flight, university hospitals or major medical centers, Mayo Clinic, the Brigham and Women's Hospital, UCLA, USF, all these really great hospitals, and they're applying to Kaiser. Huh? And they like it because, my shift is over. I'm going home. Going to be with my wife, my kids. And if you happen to work in overnight shifts, you work 3 or 4 days and the rest of the week you get off. And they pay you higher for those incredible days where you're stuck at the hospital, where you're sleeping at the hospital to be there for 24/7 to handle people. And it's not a bad system. It's working pretty well. But the overall medical system in the United States is absurd. We have the worst medical system of any developed nation on planet Earth. It's not that we don't have the capacity to be good. It's not like we don't have the research, the technology, and the know-how to be good. We just don't want to spend the money on it. Get those poor people, let them die. Well, those poor people don't do anything. They deserve to die. Now, during this massive shutdown, by the time this podcast is out, it may have been over, but it might not. The premiums, what's happening is the subsidies to people who can't afford normal, full health care. Obamacare, ACA, the Affordable Care Act, provided subsidies for people so they could have coverage. And, 10, 15, 20 million people got coverage that didn't get it before. But those subsidies had timers on them. And they were going to expire because the legislators wanted to see how it was working out. Were these subsidies working? Well, the reality is, yeah, they're working great. We have 10 or 15 million people getting medical care now that would never have had it but for Obamacare. And even though everyone screamed like a stuck pig when Obamacare became available, by the way, that's not universal health care. You pay for it even if there's a subsidy there. By the way, when we first saw universal health care in Canada back in the 1950s and 60s, it was provincial, and then it migrated to the central government. And in 1961, when Canada's parties put in universal health care, the administration that introduced health care to Canada was immediately voted out as having been socialist. You're socialist. We don't want socialists in Canada. Today, if you gave the average Canadian, even if they have to wait an extra 2 weeks to get something done, if they have a pick between ice hockey and hospital care under their universal health care, hockey is toast. Although hockey does feed a lot of patients into the system with broken bones and, concussions, but all that notwithstanding, every single country where there was it's socialism resistance, which is all bullshit. That's not there. It's not socialism. It's a social program. It's not like it's, social media is not socialism. I'm sorry. It just can't use that word and pretend like it's socialism. Every single country that has adopted it, even though it doesn't work perfectly in many, they're grateful for it. And the idea of a medical bankruptcy in Europe, it doesn't happen. The problems you have when you have medical bankruptcies in other countries, it's because people can't work, and so they're not getting paid at their jobs. In the United States, people have medical bankruptcies because they can't afford the medical care. And that's ridiculous. I don't know why we don't fix it. Anyway, people have run numbers. Yale University ran some numbers, very interesting numbers. And they basically say that if you don't extend these subsidies, Obamacare premiums will double. People who were paying a couple hundred a month are now could even pay several thousand a month. I mean, I pay a ridiculous amount of money of private health care. I'm on Medicare Plus and the enhanced coverage. My wife isn't. And I write checks for alarming amounts of money. And every time she goes to get a checkup, there's another $100. So I think we have a failed system. And I have to say, we're not doing anything. Even those deals made by Mr. Trump with all those pharmas hasn't really reduced pharmaceutical costs very much. So let's take a look at what we've got here. Well, I'm going to find some numbers here. By the way, we're looking at the United States as being kind of a sad place to live when you get older. I mean, ultimately, a lot of people are dying alone. Their spouse is gone. They can't afford to go into a managed care assisted living facility, and they're alone. And that's really sad. And there's no place for them to go, and the only cost, the stuff they've got is basically Medicare and Social Security, and that's not a lot. All right, let's look at one of my least favorite subjects, but it's one I love to talk about. And that is, how much money does the United States spend on healthcare? Well, the graphs are ridiculous, but we spend basically between 17 and 18% of our entire gross domestic product on healthcare. The United States has the single highest per capita cost of healthcare, has the single highest percentage of gross domestic product of any country on planet Earth for healthcare. And all that cost is because we are subsidizing profits. Every time someone started to say, well, look, we want to have a single payer system. Well, what are the insurance companies going to do to make money? Why do I give a shit? I'd rather live. Can we phase it out? Can we use the insurance companies the way they do in Germany to administer the system? But we can't keep paying these numbers. I mean, look at the numbers. It's ridiculous. The next highest amount of money spent on healthcare is Switzerland. And Switzerland is a pretty rich country. Poor people there there are not a lot of them. And yet they're probably not half our cost, but they're like 40% less than what we have. And if you think Swiss X-ray machines and Swiss pharmaceuticals and Swiss doctors are inferior, there's a bridge I'd like to sell you. It's a wonderful bridge that's between Brooklyn and Manhattan, and you love the bridge. You could have put a cold toll booth on that, make a fortune. I look at that and I think to myself, we're Americans. We can do anything. If we want to lick this problem, we'll lick it. And we can apply AI to administer the system in a more efficient and operable way if we want to have some brains going to it. Look at the doctors that are also engineers designing the most extraordinary equipment. And look at AI. I'll give you an example how wonderful AI can be. Let's take a situation where you want to look at breast cancer. And some breast cancer is just not detected. So what we have now is tens of millions of x-rays and scans of women who have had breast cancer diagnosed and x-rays that were taken along a sequence of their lives. And so what the AI computers have done, you take these x-rays, all the early stage x-rays before they start showing obvious cancer, and you say to the computer, this person developed breast cancer. And every time that computer starts building up that knowledge base to millions and millions and millions of photographs of x-rays, and it can see things in those x-rays the most attentive radiologists would miss. And absolutely, I will tell you that AI identifies nascent cancer way earlier than we have ever had before. And the applications of AI in developing medications, where you can create massive simulations using mRNA, sequencing, and see what works and doesn't work without having to sacrifice a single pig, hamster, or person. You can do a lot of stuff that we couldn't do before. The world has changed. So we're now looking at a situation where and I will tell you, there are a lot of Republicans in Congress right now who are really wincing that they're being told by Donald John Trump, don't rock the boat, approve the budget. We can't afford all this health care. We're going to kill it one way or the other. You promise them that we'll talk about it later. You promise them that we'll raise a boat. But then you talk to someone like Lindsey Graham, and he'll tell you, okay, we'll look at it later, and then we'll reject it. So at this moment in the time-space continuum, if the issue is, can we open the budget again and get back to work, this may be a very thin moment where the Democratic Party has the opportunity to insist that those subsidies, be approved at a minimum. And at some point, we are not going to be able to afford Medicaid. Not because we can't afford Medicaid, because we have basically said rich people need more money. And we are going to give it to them because a rising tide floats all. I know if you listen to my earlier podcast, it's not a rising tide floats all boats. It's a rising tide floats all yachts. There's nothing to these tax cuts that's going to make a damn bit of difference to 70% of the human beings in our country. That money is lost. But don't worry, the deficit that will incur is going to have a carried interest rate that we have to pay every year. And that comes out of every taxpayer's pocket. So how do you feel, unless you're one of these oligarchs, paying for someone to get a big tax cut when you're writing the check where the benefits that you used to get are being cut so they can sustain the reductions in taxes? All I got to say is, at some point, why can't we do, whatever your religion is, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, whatever you believe, do you really think that making money is worth killing people or letting them suffer? Really? I don't. And that's my perspective. I'm not a communist. I'm not a radical leftist. I've made a lot of money in the capitalist system. A lot of clients who've been in this system and done very well. But you know something? I care. And I know that my friends who are wealthy, for the most part, care. Yeah, there's some selfish bastards, but they're not my friends anymore. I like people who care about other people and will take a little bit extra to make the world a better place. So that has to do with healthcare. Ask yourself, what have you done in the last year, week, month, day to make this a better world? It doesn't take much. It could be a lot of little things, but it's sort of like the butterfly effect. Enough little things happen and big things move. Okay, we're back, and Miss Fleming is going to ask me some impertinent questions. I'm ready to answer them impertinently.
Okay, what comes to my mind when I think of healthcare and just I would say the working person, but it can include non-working people, is the connection between work and having your healthcare supplied through work. And is there anything that comes to your mind to speak to on this issue?
Well, I'll say healthcare through work worked for a number of years, but there were also societies, churches, institutions that provided healthcare for those who were indigent. And what really shocked this country was the Great Depression. The Great Depression took everybody by surprise. People who were working and had jobs all of a sudden had nothing, not even food, not even a place to sleep. So people sort of saying, okay, we need to rethink this in different ways. That's where Social Security was born in 1935. Those medical insurance things didn't start kicking in until the 1960s, Medicaid, Medicare, et cetera. And obviously, the Affordable Care Act didn't kick in until 2010. But what's happening you have to think of society as evolving. We're not running around with giant clubs, batting our wives on the head, going after bear and hunting and a hunter-gatherer thing. We evolve. And now we have a society that is going the opposite. For some reason, they glorify the 1950s and 60s as if that were the halcyon period of America. There were parts of it that were wonderful. But frankly, people were dying of things they didn't need to die of. In the 1950s, you see photographs of people in iron lungs who had polio. You have little children locked in these tubes where the machines are substituting the movement on their chest to be able to breathe. That's barbaric. We didn't have a lot of vaccines until they began to develop mostly in the 60s, 70s. And now we have technology that makes them absolutely spectacular. Why in the world would we not want to use them? Because some butthole has told you vaccines kill more than they save? How do you know that? You heard it from somebody who's a fool? Do you believe Worm Brain is helping you in any way, shape, or form? Do you think his firing every single person out of his vaccine advisory board and substituting 15th rate quacks in their place is a good thing? You know, And during this lovely shutdown, Trump and his lovely OMB, Office of Management Budget, a guy named Russell Vogt, who is one of the architects of Project 2025, decided that we didn't need all those people in the Centers for Disease Control. And he fired hundreds, if not thousands of them. And then he said, well, we didn't mean to get rid of all of you. We'll bring half of you back. You can't keep a population of hardworking American bureaucrats. By the way, half of all our bureaucrats are veterans. So for all that crap that you're saying, we're pro-veteran. No, you're not. You're actually cutting back their hospital. You're firing them from their post-military service jobs. You're not. Stop lying. Start doing what's best for most of the people. And that's real hard for people, because when you believe that you are the chosen people, where you believe you're above the law and you don't have to adhere to all the standards and morals everybody else does. When you even go to the Bible and you think it's a menu where you can pick and choose, there are 10 commandments, pick 3. It just doesn't work that way. The Constitution isn't a menu. And unfortunately, we are appointing people to judicial positions who do think it's a menu, who say, look, the Constitution is so hard to amend, we'll amend it for you by ruling in stupid ways. But medicine, health, how do you live without health? How do you go about daily life when you have trouble walking? I can't walk right now. I had some complications from surgery, and I haven't walked for months. But hey, you know what? The brain's on fire, and I can do whatever I want, and I'll get my leg back eventually. But ultimately, I care. I want you to care. I want you to look at the people around you. Love thy neighbor does not relegate it to your immediate neighborhood. And if you really care about your fellow Americans, and I care about red, blue, whatever Americans, healthcare has to be something you want everybody to have.
So if you're under the age of 26, you can still go onto your parents' healthcare. Is
For
that
now,
right?
yes.
And that was under Obamacare. And then if you're over a certain age,
Your Medicare.
you can get Medicare. If you're in the military, there's a whole system. So between the age of 26 and until you're eligible for Medicare, let's just take like the young doctors you're talking about, or any other young professional who's fresh out of school with tons of debt. And then, as you're mentioning, being able to take care of your health is one of the most important things in life. Like, where do young professionals go to get insurance if you want to open up your own shop and start your medical practice, your legal practice, or start your own little business, even if you're not?
You have a problem. I mean, I think that the problem that you have with a lot of young people is they suffer from it. Well, I'm healthy, young, I don't need it yet. And then you get an automobile accident or you get a disease. And one of the things that I thought shocking, we're seeing a massive growth of cancers in people who are in their 20s and 30s. Breast cancer and colon cancer are skyrocketing among that cohort. And that's wrong. You know, we should be able to handle that. And when you find out that you're 32 years old, you're a young woman, and you have breast cancer, which if not operated and fixed, and you're going to die, and colon cancer, which could kill you. And I don't think that that is something that people think about, but I think it comes down to, if you have empathy, someday someone's going to have empathy for you.
Well, you mentioned somebody who's like 32, for example, young and healthy, and says, I don't need health insurance. But is there even a choice? What if that person did want health insurance? Like, how does a shop owner, how does somebody who's not working for a company that provides insurance, somebody who doesn't go into the military, somebody who's over the age of 26 but not yet eligible for Medicare, as somebody who's older in life, where does that, if that person says, I'm healthy, but I want to plan for the emergencies, where does that person go right now to get health insurance? You
don't get health insurance. You go to the emergency room and hope. That's it. That's what the ER is. And what's funny is when you don't cover people through routine medical insurance and everyone starts ganging up in the emergency room, number one, the emergency room becomes one of the most dangerous rooms on planet Earth. And it's, you're basically looking at situations now where ERs can't handle the volume. And so if you eliminate the process of paying for medical care and you force people into emergency rooms where they do get whatever care they can get, but you look at people who get prescriptions and they can't afford their prescriptions. So instead of taking something they're supposed to take every day, they take it once a week. It doesn't work that way. But we don't care, because if you're a winner, who gives a shit what happens to all those losers? And if you're a loser like the rest of us seem to be labeled, you're looking over there and you're looking, upward mobility is gone, affordability is gone, and now people don't care whether I live or die. That's not being an American. We need to care for each other. Red or blue should not matter.
And when you say there's nowhere to go, there on a practical level is somewhere to go. It's just cost prohibitive. Like, for example, a Blue Shield private plan, but it's cost prohibitive. So there's an option, but it's a cost prohibitive.
If you don't have the money, it doesn't exist. And that was what the ACA had 3 levels of plan: platinum, gold, and silver. And you got coverage within that was enough. And if you couldn't afford it, you get subsidies to afford it. And that's right now disappearing. Imagine if you were spending $500 a month for your family's insurance under the ACA, and now it goes up to $2,000 a month. You have no place to get that money. So what do you choose? Don't have medical care? I don't pay my rent. I don't eat food. Where do you go? And unfortunately, the people you put in Washington, D.C. by election, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, have not figured out how to take care of you. And as they say, when you hear someone talking about creeping socialism or the radical left, understand they're trying to make sure that you are going to be treated as a loser, whether you're not a loser to anyone in your family or your environment, but to the oligarchs, you are a loser, you're expendable. I mean, why should they be deprived of a better jet or a third home? Because you need medical care. Who do you think you are? I made this money. Okay, I may have inherited a little bit, but that's not right. We need to care about each other. And if you have a micron of religiosity in your body, you should know better.
What effect is all this having on medical practices? I don't know if you can speak to this, but I've noticed that at least here in Los Angeles, and I can't imagine this is the only place, but a lot of doctors or offices that used to accept insurance, even if it was private insurance, Medicare, a lot of it's cash only now. And that isn't just the extraordinary luxury services, even some of the basic care offices.
Well, one of the concepts that have sort of crept into the medical profession is something called concierge service. And of course, you think of a concierge as being, I'm in a hotel, you're going to get me a restaurant reservation at that lovely restaurant. It's got 3 stars. That's kind of like the she thing you think about. But these are doctors with ordinary practices who say to you, okay, you have to spend an extra $250 a year paid to me so that I will have you as a priority. The reality is the system doesn't work because it places profits over healthcare. And as long as people are not willing to have universal health, everything we're talking about is cured at some level, maybe not perfection, by universal health care. Why do we want to stop that? Why don't we figure out a way to take care of people in the medical system? For example, you have medical loans, forgive them. We're going to have a system now where when you go to medical school, we'll pay for it. You just got to be good enough to get in, and you got to work your butt off to stay in. There are countries on this planet where they do that. We don't. Why have we purposely made college education so expensive? Why have we even made trade school prohibitive? I remember when these trade schools were going bankrupt during a certain, I won't mention DeVos by name, Secretary of Education in the first Trump term. Oops, it slipped out. Who basically said, look, you went to a trade school that went bankrupt. You borrowed money to be there. Yeah, you owe it. Screw you. We just don't care about anything. The number one killer of children is guns and bullets. But we're only increasing the ability of people to get AR-15s and ghost guns and upgrade the AR-15 from a single shot to an automatic weapon because we don't give a shit about our kids. I want to have this large phallic shooting thing that I can have and carry around and look like I'm hot. During the Republican era, from 1994 to 2004, we had assault weapons banned by law. The statute had a sunset clause, and almost immediately after that, we decided we needed to kill some kids. I mean, how many of us, I know I didn't go through, active shooter drills, but kids are dying from bullets. And that's a medical issue because bullets cause bleeding, cause death, is a health issue. So I'm going to end my presentation today with begging people, get involved and have empathy, have common sense, and let's start rebuilding trust so our legislators and our leaders can talk to each other and compromise, which is what we have done for 250 years. Let's not kill the goose that laid massive numbers of golden eggs. And thank you, and until next time, Peter Dekom. Bye-bye.
If you would like to give feedback, suggestions for new topics, or have a question that might be selected for a future podcast, please email us at dekompodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Until next time.